Hi, I'm Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, and I'm honored to serve as chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. I was proud to recently introduce the United Nations Transparency, Accountability, and Reform Act. The bill's name speaks for itself. It's about reforming the UN to make it work again. Now, why is this bill necessary? Well, last year, as our nation faced skyrocketing deficits and debt, the U.S. contributed billions of taxpayer dollars to the UN, 21% more than we contributed the year before. Now, what do taxpayers get in return for all that money? We get a UN that is best described as backwards because it's doing the opposite of what it should be doing. We pay for a backwards UN whose bureaucrats are about to receive a 3% pay raise, even as many ordinary Americans struggle to make ends meet. We pay for a backwards UN that's about to increase its already huge operating budget, even as our federal and state governments tighten their belts. We pay for a backwards UN that, instead of telling the Palestinians to make peace with Israel, is on the verge of making peace even harder to accomplish by recognizing a Palestinian state that is not a partner for peace and is partly controlled by Hamas. We're paying for a backwards UN Human Rights Council that continues to be hijacked by human rights abusers like Cuba, China, and Saudi Arabia. Those regimes use the council to repeatedly condemn Israel while ignoring many real human rights violations worldwide. It's also backwards when the Iranian regime, which continues to stone women to death, sits on the UN Commission on the Status of Women. Now, why do Americans pay so much to the UN and get so little back? Well, the reason is another backward situation. At the UN, the countries that call the shots don't have to pay the bills. At the General Assembly, the vast majority of countries contribute next to nothing to the UN, but they can vote together to adopt budgets and stick the U.S. and other big donors with the tab. And what does the U.S. do in response? Well, the executive branch goes along and pays every cent of our assessed contributions, 22% of the UN's budget, plus billions more. And because the UN bureaucracy and other member states know that we will pay in full no matter what, they have zero incentive to reform. But there is a simple, common sense alternative. First, we must condition our funding to the UN on real reforms. And second, we must shift our funding to the UN to a voluntary basis so that the American people will get to choose how much of our tax dollars go to the UN and what the money is spent on. This is common sense. If I contract with someone else to provide a service for me, and if they don't meet the minimum standards in providing that service, then I withhold payment until I get what I contracted for. Because if I keep paying my bills in full, as the U.S. does with the UN, I'll never get what I'm paying for. For decades, the UN has been in breach of contract with the American people. It's time for Americans to demand better and put our money where our mouth is. I hope you'll join me in supporting the United Nations Transparency, Accountability, and Reform Act so that we can protect U.S. taxpayer dollars and make the UN work again. Thank you.